guys, welcome. Here we have Justin Sunseri, the host of the Stuck Not Broken podcast. He's a specialist on the polyvagal theory. He's a licensed family and marriage therapist based in California. I've been following his work for some time, and I found that it's been a really important part of the reparenting journey. And so I'd like to have him on and to invite him to share a bit more about his work so we can see how it relates to the reparenting journey. Because as I've said before, it's a really critical piece of the emotional regulation component of the reparenting journey, which many of us are struggling with. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Justin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Honored. Thank you so much for inviting me on. Can't wait.
Sure, thanks for being here. Before we get started, maybe we can just go over some basic introductory information about you. So where are you from and where are you based now?
Oh man, I live in beautiful Stockton, California. I say the word beautiful. It's not literal there. I am a therapist, a coach. I have a private practice, married, couple of kiddos, a huge 49ers fan, Seinfeld addict. It's a bit about me.
That sounds good. And so
Yeah.
how long have you been working as a therapist for?
I think 17 years now.
Okay,
Yeah,
wow,
17
that's quite
years.
some time.
Yeah, I
Quite some
love it.
time.
I love being a
And
therapist. Yep.
have you only been working as a family therapist during that time, or have you done different areas and
Well,
different kind of work?
so the title's a little misleading because it's uh, licensed marriage and family therapist. But as a marriage and family therapist, I can also work with individuals, I can work with couples, I can work with families, I can work with kids, pretty much any kind of therapy or modality, like I can do that. I can do group therapy.
Okay,
So it's not just limited. The title's a little bit misleading.
okay,
Ever since I started, yeah, I've been doing family stuff, individual, lots of
nice,
experience working with teenagers, kids. I
nice.
love working with families. More recently, couples work. In the past
Wow.
couple of years, I've been doing couples. So yeah, a lot of experience done group stuff, psychoeducation, like classes. A lot of experience over the 17 years in different modalities and
That sounds
populations.
that sounds good. That's really important. Here, so on
Yeah.
this podcast that I've been working on is focused on reparenting. And so we were chatting a bit before we started, and you said you weren't really too sure about the details of this process and how this all got started and how it came about. And it's also kind of new-ish for me. So I came across this about 2020, so it's about 4 years ago now. And it was actually on a podcast, also a different podcast. It was called The Adult Child by Andrea. And by that time, I found the 12-step adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families program. I spent some time there, gaining some insight because their program is based on the 12 steps, AA, CODA,
Yeah.
all of these other 12-step programs. But what makes this one unique is that they integrate a lot of research from IFS, for example, even some DBT skills, because they're a group of therapists who kind of put this literature together and they're still producing more
Yeah.
uh, to this day now. But I'm always looking for, how do you say that? Always looking for, what's missing or the flaw in the program, So maybe that's my, how do you
Sure.
say that? Like, yeah, lack of trust and authority, right? Because I was telling my friend, if I'm going to blow up my life, I'd rather blow up my own life, by my own decisions than following a book that I know is
Heck yeah.
not the complete answer for reparenting, because reparenting is such a huge process of trying to reparent, remother, and refather yourself for some of us at the same time. And it's quite a complex and it's quite a complex and I'm losing my words today when something is at odds, because you're trying to
Yeah.
instill a masculine energy and also a feminine energy at the same time, right? This nurturing and protection. So for someone like me who really did not have a mother or father growing up, they were there, but they didn't really provide that mothering or fathering. So trying to learn how to balance both of those at the same time is a very heavy process.
Mm.
And another thing that I've noticed in general, before we go to the polyvagal theory as it relates to reparenting, is that many people are at different levels of reparenting. So maybe someone just missed a mother, whereas someone else might have, missed a father and they had to become the mother to take care of the other children. So there are so many ways that people who are in the groups and circles that I'm in for reparenting need to continue looking for information to address the core problems that they have because it really needs to be a customized, tailored solution for each person, which is again one of the reasons why I think that
Yeah.
the program is a great support, but for people to really get unstuck, which I see people in this program like 10, 20 years, 30 years later. I don't know if that's a sign that this is really the right place to be, you know. Reparenting is an ongoing process. But the most important piece, which is why I'm reaching out for you today, is the emotional regulation. Most people who have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, which is recurring experiences of trauma without the ability to have comfort or co-regulation. Um, these
Mm.
difficult paths make it basically impossible for people with CPTSD to manage their emotions in an effective way to be able to live and respond to daily pressures or any other type of even socializing. You know, it really touches every area of
Yeah.
your life. And
Yeah.
one question that I would like to start off with you, since you did not have that huge background on the polyvagal, on the reparenting, is how do you see um, that polyvagal theory could be applied to people who are living most of their lives in shutdown, perhaps?
When
So,
you say shutdown, do you mean it in the polyvagal sense, or do you mean it in more of a general sense?
in a more of a polyvagal sense, so more of
Okay.
that dorsal vagal collapse, like not really in the safe, the parasympathetic safety, social engagement, you know. So it
Yeah.
seems like if someone had a PTSD incident where there was a one-off trauma where they were kind of shaken and could get back on course, but for someone who's
Yeah.
lived so long at this state of disconnection, do you think that polyvagal theory could still be helpful?
Yeah. Yeah. So polyvagal theory is it's knowledge, it's science. It's not a modality, it's not prescription. It doesn't tell you exactly what to do. It's just it helps explain this is what's happening within you. So that's the benefit. That's the groundwork, or that's the foundation that you build on. And so the way I work is, or at least with the podcast and my various offerings and stuff, like here's the knowledge, and the knowledge has this impact of, well, it helps just make sense. It clarifies, oh, that's what's happening within me
Yeah,
based on the context of my life. But it also has this normalizing impact, which is like, so it's not just me. Other people who had my life likely would be stuck in a shutdown state, or whatever state that someone might be in. So it's validating. It helps to name emotions and or experiences, the emptiness and the coldness and the heaviness and the aloneness and the hopelessness that someone in shutdown lives with. It validates that by giving it a name. We'll call it shutdown. It's not just like a diagnosis, it's a validation. It's like, this is the state of your biology. So it
okay,
validates all the experiences and it normalizes it. So like just learning polyvagal theory information, just it gets that level of validation and normalization. And now what you do with that, that's it doesn't look the same for everybody, but commonly it's going to be, let's get more and more into your safety state. That's pretty darn important. So the theory itself is not a modality. It doesn't say what to do. It just says, hey, here's an answer. Here's what you went based on what you went through. Here's what may have happened within you on a biological level. And the person says, oh, now I have words for it. Now I understand I'm not different or abnormal. I actually have a very normal reaction to my life context. And then they ask, well, what the hell do I do now? And that's where it looks different person to person, but that's where you can build on the knowledge and move
definitely,
forward with it.
definitely. Um, have you seen many people come to find solutions working in groups, or is it more of an individual process that you found?
I've worked, my mind goes a few different places. I've worked individually with people and applying this knowledge and tailoring it specifically to each person, I think is extremely beneficial. But recently I've started doing cohort style learning, which is we're learning the same information and we're also doing homework together. We're big getting together. We're ending together, like a 4-week kind of thing. So that's not therapy, but it's shared learning and discussion. And that the participants are telling me, like, I feel so normal. I feel so much more connected. So, like right now, I'm doing a cohort for people in shutdown, and the knowledge is like helpful, but connecting with other people who know what you're going through, like on a deep level, and maybe have similar life context, but just at least day to day have the a similar stuck defensive state, like shutdown. Being able to learn with and discuss with people who get it on that level, it's different than one-on-one work. I think it's very complementary. So both of them are, I think, can be very beneficial, but someone who is deeper into shutdown probably is not going to be as ready to connect with others in a group or in a cohort. And so their avenue might be more like one-on-one based. And then as they develop their safety state and are ready for more connections, then they might be like, oh, I'm still, in shutdown, but I feel more ready to connect with others who I can relate to, who are also in shutdown.
Understood. That makes a lot of sense also. I asked that question because now if we have like a loneliness epidemic that's kind of sweeping the wave of not just people who are traumatized, but really across the Western world and
Seriously. Yeah.
more broadly, right? So I thought to ask
Yep.
about that because there is kind of like a cross section where people who in the reparenting journey, they need to continue to make more connections with people who having a similar understanding of their previous experiences and their current emotional challenges. But the downside to that is if you kind of create this circle or this bubble of people who are also traumatized in the same way, you're decreasing the chances to learn um, typical patterns of behavior, right? That
Yeah.
could be less
Yeah.
traumatized, right? And it also kind of, in a way, it can reinforce it, because each person within your support group, for example, could be at a different level of recovery, a different level
Oh,
of
yeah.
growth. And so, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tricky thing to decide. Like, do you want to stick with the people who understand you, or do you want to branch out to try to find safer people who can help you build the, non-traumatized behavioral patterns, or even just thought
Sure.
patterns?
Yeah, for sure. So someone who's deep in shutdown, they're probably less likely to go join a local bicycling club and go, biking
Yeah,
around the city, right? But they may be more likely to join a group of other people who are in shutdown. So I think it's up to people like me, the moderators of those groups, to ensure that we're not here just to like stay in shutdown. We are here for a purpose, which is
yeah,
to come out of shutdown.
exactly.
So in my group, like, yeah, it's a small group of people who are mostly in shutdown, but we are not here to talk for an hour and a half each week about shutdown. We are here to learn about how to get out of shutdown. That's where
Yeah,
it's a shared experience. We all have the same goal. So I think that's a nice balance where you're meeting with people who get it and are with you on some level biological, like on a very biological, emotional, even cognitive level. We have similar experiences, but we're all agreeing that we're meeting up to have this goal of improving our lives, coming out of shutdown, um, increasing our levels of safety within ourselves and maybe amongst each other, and reducing the impact of shutdown on our life. Like that's the goal. And then from there, all of a sudden, maybe the bike thing might be too much still, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know what? I'm wanting to do this, arts club at this place on the corner that just catches my eye every time I drive by it. And
mm,
maybe it's time to go in there and do some pottery. It might open up that next level of connection or that readiness for connection.
okay. That brings me to another interesting point. When you're working with your client to I mean, would that be considered a safety anchor, for example, that new experience that someone would have,
Like the
for
pottery thing,
example, yeah, like the pottery, for example, or is that something different?
that is a potential safety anchor. So when you notice that there's this thing that just pulls at me, a lot of times when people, as they start to come out of shutdown, the idea of going to a gym, that like it just I can't get out of my mind. Like I should go to the gym, I should do that, but I'm not ready to. I don't want to be around people. I don't want to hear all the noise. I don't want to like it's overwhelming. But like there's something about it that just kind of pulls at somebody. So there is a potential, maybe a safety cue, but it also could be just that my biology is now ready for that next thing. So
Right.
say the difference is if I can tease it apart would be something that cues safety would be, maybe a small group of people who are doing art stuff in a cute little quaint corner store in inner city. Like the quaintness, maybe there's plants in there, there's art, there's, putting your hands into clay. All of that is it's sensory, it's co-regulative because there's other people there. There's the visuals of the greens, like all that cues safety, both passively and actively. What I mean is passively is the greenery. You don't have to like really do anything. You don't have to meditate on it. It just filters it. It just comes into your system and you feel a little bit better, which is more safety. But there's also things you could do actively and mindfully, like really get your hands into the clay and feel the temperature of it and smile with people and notice like what that feels like inside. All that's more active, mindful safety. So that could pull at someone because there's a lot of safety there. But something like the gym, that would be more for it could have safety elements, but that's probably more for like an avenue to welcome and even release upcoming sympathetic activation. So as you come out of shutdown, the next step would be that your body gets into sympathetic flight fight activation is more mobility
Yeah.
from immobility into mobility. So as more mobility comes in your system, that's where like the gym might be a really good idea or daily walks. I should do that, or I need to take
Right.
my dog out more often. Like all those things become more attractive because your body's getting more ready for mobility. So it's
Interesting.
similar, but it's different than like something that is just a cue of safety. Does that make
Understood.
sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Cool.
sense. I know that's something that, a lot of the people who I've met in my support groups, I've gone to a few now, they don't really have many good memories to pull back on of safety, times to that they could visualize or, scenarios that they could
Yeah.
recall. And so that's really
Yeah.
been a big problem. And it's also something that people don't bring up traditionally in the support group meetings. And it's kind of what you mentioned before. We are coming together, or you mentioned in your groups, to really focus on making that progress and moving forward. And in the groups that I've been in within the ACA program, there does seem to be a lot of the stuckness. And so that's kind of one of
Sure.
my motivations in bringing this in to see how we can help people make that next step to break out of the frozen dorsal vagal collapse. Um,
Yeah, for sure. It's not easy. The shutdown, the dorsal vagal seems to be the most difficult. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know how to rank them, but like there's when you're in shutdown, there's a different level of disconnection versus flight and fight. Shutdown is very alone. In
yeah,
flight and fight, you can go to the gym. That you're more likely to go somewhere to release. You're still
yeah,
disconnected, but
yeah,
you're more likely to be around people. You can do that bicycling club because you're so like sympathetically driven.
yeah,
Whereas in shutdown, you're very disconnected, potentially very hopeless, helpless, feeling
yeah,
alone, literally alone, and you're isolating yourself at home. So the potential for connecting and getting help is, or connecting with others at least, and
mhm,
and having moments of connection and safety, and it's lower. It's just lower, and the
yeah,
potential to reach out for help from a professional is probably lower also.
yeah. Where along the line would you see someone who is not in complete isolation where they're staying at home all the time, but say this person is going to the gym, maybe they're doing some volunteer work. So they're interacting, but they're actually not taking the benefits of that interaction. So they're not able to have the conversation, but it's not providing any of the normal benefits or, you know, emotions.
What do you mean have a conversation about what?
I don't know. Just like if you were going to work and you just say hi to your coworker, or if
Oh,
you were at the pottery class and you say hi to someone who you saw last week, or hi to the teacher, you have basic conversation, but then they are lacking actually some kind of recognition of the emotions or the meeting of their emotional needs, basically, by the
yeah, that
connection.
person to me that sounds like someone who maybe lives in a primarily defensive state. It could be flight fight, it could be shutdown, it could be freeze.
Yeah.
So that person is have a pretty dominant defensive state, but they have avenues where it's not as dominant. So work, volunteering, pottery class. These are avenues like they're still in shutdown, but it's not as dominant. Whereas when they're
Yeah.
alone, all of a sudden it's like, oof, that
Yeah.
that shutdown becomes much more dominant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that probably is due to when they're outside their home, even though they're not like having deep conversations and maybe tons of laughter, they're still seeing faces, they're still seeing smiles. Like that is a passive cue of safety. It's co-regulation. So they're not deeply like talking about, all their stuff in therapy, but like they're interacting with people and that there has a lot of value to it. Even
Yeah.
if you don't realize it, there's a lot of value there. And it does have a benefit, a very positive benefit to the system, to our
Yeah.
biology. It helps us feel safer, even just like little micro moments. And outside the context of that, again, like that pottery place might have greenery hanging from the walls, and that has a positive impact on your system. But when you go home, like the dishes need to be done, there's stuff laying around, there's all these
Yeah.
different little cues of quote unquote danger. It's not real danger, but it
Mhm.
just reinforces like, yeah, I can't do anything right and my life sucks and I'm just gonna go hide in the dark and go to sleep. It's way different.
Yeah. Okay. Understood.
Yeah.
Um, when you are working with clients on this, is there a different way that you approach it with children versus adults? What are the different kind of needs that you would try to address if you are working with an adult as opposed to a child?
I haven't worked with like younger kids in a while. I work with 12 and up at this point, and mostly it's
Okay.
adults at this point. Adults, it's with adults, it's talking, processing, feeling, mindfulness, looking inward. Adults seem to have a harder time with that. In all honesty, they're more cut off from themselves. They have a lifetime worth of decades worth of all these things they do to disconnect. You know, they have these beliefs and um, behaviors that they do that cut them off. You know, kids don't have that developed. They are developing it probably due to the adults in their lives, but they have more access to what they're feeling inside. And so with children, if I use thematic language, they get it more and they're able to roll with it better and
Okay.
describe what's happening within them. With adults, it's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
With adults, if
Understood.
I ask them where something lives in their body, they'll be like, what? I have a body, like something exists outside of my brain. And kids seem to have a better connection with that. And
Okay.
so, like yesterday, my son and I were walking home. It's not therapy, obviously, but we were walking home from school, and he was telling me about, oh, he has a hard time riding his bike. Has been a struggle for him. He has a lot of fear around it. And so we were talking about his fear, and he was like, "Yeah, at this point, I have half fear and I have half happiness." And he was able to tell me his body where that lives and how it feels. And we don't. I'm not doing therapy with my kids, but we
Yeah.
talk this way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's a lot of love and support in the family, and so I think kids generally gravitate toward that, especially if it's normalized, not like heavy-handed, but just it's normalized. Like we just talk about our emotions and how they live in our body and stuff. So kids gravitate toward that, and they can describe like, oh, I live, feels like this, or it's like butterflies, or it's happiness like that. And adults don't do that as much. So that would be the difference. Like with adults, I have to more explicitly teach, it seems.
Okay.
Whereas with kids, they just kind of get it, and they can even play it out versus adults that struggle to talk about it and play it out, or they don't play it out really, but talk about it, feel it mindfully, and with self-compassion. Kids can do that a little bit easier, it seems.
Okay. Yeah, that does seem to make sense about how people over time are developing those defenses and really things kind of
Oh yeah,
just become crystallized, right? In a way. And
yeah.
there
Part, yep.
becomes even a fear. There becomes a lot of cost associated with going back to try to get in touch with those emotions. It can be quite disruptive, to be honest.
It really is. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
As
The,
someone
the
who is in the
other,
middle of that process now, it is quite disruptive.
yeah, yeah. The other big thing difference is that with kids, I meet with them one on one, but I seem to dedicate like half my time one on one with them, and then half the time them with their parents. And sometimes I'll
Okay.
meet with the parents alone so that I can bolster what they're doing. But with kids, like they need parenting, not reparenting, but actual parenting.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm using that phrase correctly, like they need good
Yeah.
parents, good enough
Yeah.
parents, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Good enough. It's the
Yeah. So if I can
33%,
get,
right?
what is it?
Is it 33% of sufficient enough contact
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
repair? It's quite low, to be honest. So
It is. Yeah. But if
surprisingly
it's,
low.
yeah. So if I can get parents doing good enough parenting, the kids are pretty much okay. They're going to be okay. It's when we're below good enough that's where the issues
Yeah.
come up. Yeah, so I spend time with parents alone. I'll spend time with the family as a unit, and then the kid by themselves as well.
Okay. Um, Sounds a good way to approach it, and
Yeah,
you're right. If the parents are supported, then hopefully they'll be passing down less of that trauma to their children. They'll be programming them less with the dysfunctional coping mechanisms, and
yeah,
they can basically avoid this heavy lifting work, which is
yeah,
reparenting. That
yeah.
it's really a lifetime's work, depending on how much you're trying to work on. Um,
Could be. Yeah.
yeah. In terms of the patients you worked with, um, are there any that are too far beyond, I don't know, like in terms of CPTSD? Because I know I've been facing some issues to find the right care provider. I live in the Netherlands, right?
That's
So we have
hard.
public assisted service, but at the same time, I'm a Black American man, so it's quite difficult to find the right cultural fits. And here, there are even
Yeah.
less male therapists available than in the US. So,
There's less.
male therapists available than in the US.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that it's quite. I was explaining to one of the therapists last week that it's great that people have access to the bare minimum service here, because you can easily get an appointment paid for by your insurance, with a therapist. Sometimes you have to wait up to 6 months. It can be as short as 2 weeks to up to 6 months, depending on the location.
Yeah.
But the
Wow.
challenge is that the people who are working in the public service, government run hospitals or government institutions, they are not compensated the best. That means that they are not necessarily the most motivated. They
Oh
are
no.
not necessarily doing the most reading and extra research
Yeah.
to develop themselves outside. And so it became really frustrating after some time to continue to look for people who have the expertise on CPTSD, because they're really not available at large. And
Yeah.
so, has there been any research from your knowledge or any practical workshops or something where people who are really trying to use understanding of this polyvagal theory for PTSD? And I mean that in cases with extreme trauma, right? Like, I
Right.
understand that we can understand how the nervous system is working. We can understand the steps that we need to take to ideally shift ourselves out of these states. But for people who have such long-standing trauma where things are starting to pile on top of each other, how do you see that these kind of people can best be helped in our current model of how things are working?
Oh man. Okay.
It's a heavy
It's a
question.
lot. We got to break this down. Yeah.
Yeah,
So have I seen someone that I don't think can be helped? Honestly, I don't think so.
yeah,
I truly believe that everyone I work with, there's some things can get better even a little bit. Like I know that. How long that takes, that's different. You know what I mean? I
yeah.
usually don't do super long-term therapy. I tend to get results pretty quickly, even across diagnoses and whatnot. Um, at the same time, I do have a client that's been going on for a couple of years, and I would say he's more in that CPTSD range, and it's a longer process, but there's still improvements in moving forward. Um, so I don't think anyone's out of. I don't think it's impossible for anybody like to make change. It's going to take longer for some, and depending on tons of factors.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's I'll put that out there. Like I don't think it's hopeless. I don't think anything's hopeless. The other thing is there's a lot you touched upon. Um, yeah, sadly, you do kind of get what you pay for. Like that's just the reality of it. And I tend to believe that across I know across the areas that I've worked, I provide a high level of service, but that is not the reality for everyone you're going to come in contact with. If you're going through insurance providers pay their providers less than if the provider was getting it through cash pay, like just private
Oh, really?
transaction. Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
didn't realize that in the US.
Yeah. So here in California in the US, insurance will pay. It's different for insurances and whatnot, but like they might pay significant, like half as much as someone might get
Yeah.
for private pay. So that provider should do the right thing and provide a high level of service, but the reality is, I don't think they always do. I know it because I work with people who say I go through Kaiser, which is a very like medical model. Here's your diagnosis. What's the update? Fill this out. Get out of here.
Mm.
Like that's not a high level of service. It's very what's the word? Not streamlined, but automated kind of conveyor belt.
Okay.
Like that's it's an insurance provided. Like yeah, they're providing therapy, yeah, but I consistently hear from people who have worked with Kaiser and places like Kaiser that they felt dehumanized and uncared about.
Mm.
So like that's just the reality of it. And so when they pay, and I do private pay, when they pay, it's like you're more likely to get a better experience. You just are. Part of that, I believe, is because of the lower compensation. It kind of people get jaded. They do. When you work for a school district, when you work
Yeah,
for
exactly.
county providers, government level stuff, the bureaucracy, the we're on a conveyor belt in a sense. It's very detached. It's very like fill this out, do this paperwork. We're about to get audited. Did you do that right? And so like you don't just come into work and focus on your clients, which is as therapists, that's what we want. We want to come into work and just we just want to worry about our clients and provide a good service. But when we're not in private practice, the reality is there's a ton of other things that cloud the issue. It just does, and that's sad, but it is. That's the reality of it. So there's that. Tell me what else there's. I know there's more to your question, but I lost track of it now.
Mm. Yeah, so basically it was if you think that there are people who have too much, like the CPDSD, the first one that you mentioned, the first one
I
that you
don't think
responded
so.
to, like
I
another
really don't.
question that
I don't think so. Actually, the other thing you asked at the end, sorry, I thought I heard that you asked like, what does it look like to start making progress? Is that was that at the tail end of your question?
yeah, that's actually kind of, I was going to relate it to another question. Well, you mentioned that you have one client who is more long term as opposed to the others who are more mm, shorter term sessions. And so, what are your, what have you learned in the process of working with him since he is like a standalone or he stands apart? Have you gained any lessons or insight without giving his life story?
Yeah, I'm not going to share. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
of
me
course.
personally, patience. I like to get results. I like to get results quickly. It's very important
Yeah,
to me. Like even in
yeah,
my private community, like I do the cohort and courses and whatnot. It's
yeah,
super important to me that they're helpful. Like I do in my current cohort, this is the third round of it. I ask them to complete a survey ahead of time. Like, is this helpful? What's your level of safety? What's your level of shutdown?
yeah.
And it's important to me to see that. Like, I want to hear from people that it's helpful, but also I want to see the data. This is helpful.
Mm,
We have something that someone can implement to help themselves outside the context of me working with them one on one. So I am. That's very important to me. I like to get results and sooner than later. I don't like to
yeah,
draw stuff out. I want people to get I get so much out of seeing people get unstuck. It is, I love it. There's something about it that just speaks to me. Like, but there's an urgency that I know within myself that can come with that. And I've recognized that in my therapeutic work. There's some line, like, let's go. Like, and that does not work very well with people who are deeper in shutdown. That just does not work very well. People who are in flight fight, that works pretty damn well. Like, I can, give them a nudge, a compassionate nudge,
yeah,
and they can roll with that really well. And shut down, no. So patience with this client and other clients as well. Like just a step forward is it's a step forward, and like I have to be okay with that. And so that's something I'm continually learning.
yeah. Continue. Yeah. Also, it's a familiar lesson. It's like a one step forward, two steps back sometimes three steps
Yeah.
forward, two back,
Yep.
but there's always progress, I've noticed that, and definitely in the past 2 years, um, I've noticed a lot of progress. I think I was in complete, complete collapse actually, and so I've come quite a long way in 2 years from the most extreme point that you can have
Yeah.
to, now being able to to function, to be able to focus and read enough to to start getting more
Yeah.
engaged, more volunteering, more my own projects, more writing, more music again. And so I
Good for
know
you.
that it's a long process, and I've
Seriously.
also been someone who's done that alone without family support,
Oh man.
or really
Happy
without
for you, man.
the friendship
Seriously.
support either. Yeah, really
Yeah.
lucky, I think, because
Yeah.
I'm really grateful because even though some things were difficult, I have a lot that kept me safe, like despite the fact that my childhood trauma began young and I did not really have that guidance and someone really seeing me, basically, right?
Yeah.
There were a lot of things that helped me to still overcome that and to succeed with, a lot of my goals, so that kind of balances out the pain, I just have a lot of negative experiences, but nothing on the positive side, then, I would be more, you know, a bit less, more hopeless.
Yeah.
But because I managed to fight, I had like this tenacity. Yeah, it did help to balance out that equation a bit. And now it's just the fact of trying to acknowledge that pain that's real, the depth of the pain and um, the depth of the damage, and what needs to be
Yeah.
rebuilt or built for the first time. Maybe even to be honest
Yeah.
with you,
Yeah.
for the first time, a lot of things are, new to me, I should say.
Dude,
Um,
I applaud you on where you're at. I don't know if that means anything to you, but like that's incredible. And the point where you're at, which is like, what else is inside of me? What's the depth of my pain? That's a significant endeavor. Like what I would encourage, not just you, but anybody is, yeah, like that's important. What's the depths of your pain? What is it? What's it truly like? What does it feel like to be you in every or us in every facet, including the pains within us? But also, have we explored the depths of our potential to connect? With ourselves, with others, with the environment. Do you know what lights you up when you smell something or see something or taste something? Like what brings you something that maybe is joy, maybe is contentment or relaxation? Like that's just as important. And
yeah,
I think actually is the priority and more important. So in my coursework and the way I work with my clients is before we go into the depths, if we go into the depths of your pains, before that, can you tell me what helps you feel safe? And if not, then we're not ready. I don't think we're ready for the depths of
yeah,
pain yet. And so what
yeah,
helps us feel safe might be as small, like just like a micro moment. When someone tastes a blueberry, do you feel safer or not? Do you feel more connected to yourself and your at least your sensation experience of taste? Do you feel more connected to that? Like that's less numb, that's less shut down. If you can connect with your sense of taste, at least in that micro moment, you're less shut down than you were before that. So can you keep stacking those wins and eventually maybe smile with another, co-regulate with your pet, like, hold them close, feel their warmth? Can you start to move with a certain song? As you build those safety experiences up, at some point, I call it the interest impulse. At some point, your body might say, I mean, metaphorically, your body might say, I feel safe enough. I have a really firm grounding in the present moment. I'm no longer numb. I am now curious about what the hell else is going on inside of me and what's that like. So that's when you're actually interested and curious about what's inside of you. That's a really good indication that it's now time to touch upon the inner pains, or at least a little bit, not all of it, a little bit. If we do that before we are genuinely interested and curious, that's a pathway to re-traumatization. That word is hard for me.
yeah,
That's if you try to go into your shutdown and your safety state can't be with it, that's going to re-traumatize yourself. Actually, I did a Q&A yesterday with a small group in my community, and she used the analogy of it's almost like your safety state acts as a parent to
yeah.
your defensive activation. Maybe this is a tie-in for reparenting.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, she said, so it's like, so I was saying, you have, like, the safety state has to be active. And when it's active, then the defensive state can actually exist side by side. We can
Yeah,
consciously allow both of those experiences. and pendulate, meaning go
Understood.
back and forth. And she
Understood.
said, so it's almost like the safety state acts as a parent and allows or coaxes out or reduces the fear of the defensive activation. And I think that's a really good analogy. Like, yeah, when your safety
And
stays
I like
strong
that.
enough, yeah, when the safety stays strong enough, then you can tap into or allow or just sort of coax out what else is within me that maybe I've been ignoring with due cause. Maybe you've had to cope with
Yeah.
it and ignore it and just deal with it. But maybe at this point or in the future, you'll have so much safety within you that you can now say, I really want to know what it's like to be me. So that's different. That interest impulse is different than my therapist or this program or this person on the internet says I have to feel my feelings. I have to feel all of them to feel better.
Mm.
That's a hell of a lot different. If you're doing it because you feel like you have to, that's potentially grounds for re-traumatization.
Traumatization. Yeah, the first step of trauma therapy is actually emotion regulation and creation of a safe container, right?
Yeah,
And as you explained this, it's exactly what was missing. It took me to that point. My
always. Yeah,
therapist went directly to that, and
yeah.
it's such I don't want to say common sense thing, but I would assume that most trauma therapists would know that, and she was the manager of this facility and she did not. So
They don't know.
yeah,
They don't know.
it's
They
like
don't know.
it
No.
seems such a basic thing though. But
You know,
that
when you
cost
reflect on
that
it,
simple mistake cost me a
yeah,
lot.
it's not just you. It is not just you.
Yeah, yeah,
And even it seems common sense because once you know, it's like, well, yeah, duh. It does seem like, yeah, I gotta feel safe in the present moment to then feel my other feelings. Seems super obvious, but the reality is, no. It's in therapy school, we're not taught that. We're taught you got to tell the client has to tell their story over and over again, basically until they feel better, which is just numbness and shutdown, really.
yeah.
And before I knew this polyvagal stuff, I fell into that trap as a therapist, and that sucks, and I regret it. But I was trained in and told to do trauma focused CBT, which I'm sure your audience is familiar with, I would guess. Like, and I did, and I freaking hated it. And I don't know if I made it worse for that client. I would hate to think that I do. Actually, no, I didn't because later on I heard she was doing okay, like it helped, but kind of. But every time we would meet and we would go through her horrific story, she would get farther, yeah, but she got number, I think. I think she
Mm,
got part of it was getting number, but there was a lot of co-regulation. We had a really good, solid relationship. I think I was the only co-regulative relationship in her life, sadly. And that was a lot. And honestly, I think that helped more than telling the story over and over and over again. I think the co-regulation was more the bigger piece for that.
okay, that makes sense. It's a really
Anyhow, it
important
seems common
piece.
sense, but it's not, dude. It's not, sadly.
Yeah, yeah. We'll get there one day, I think. Things are
I
starting
think
to change.
fingers crossed. I would argue that previously, and maybe it's more of a westernization thing, but like we must have had this knowledge within us that co-regulation and being in the present moment and using our senses and mindfulness with our inner experiences, that this must have been a part of our human experience maybe eons ago. I don't know. It
Mm,
must have been because my other mammals do it just fine. Like my
mm,
dogs can self-regulate just fine. They go out in the backyard, lay in the sun, and they're good. Like they can self-regulate. They can release their shame and their trauma and whatnot. We don't do that. There's something different about us, and I think it's more of a modernization kind of thing. So,
Individualistic societies also.
so I hope that you're right and that we are getting closer to where we probably already were and lost track of. I really hope that we're getting back to that felt sense and connection with ourselves and others.
Yeah, is this really the key of everything?
Yeah,
Mm, yeah. So as we take some time to wrap up now, I thank you for taking some time to be here to discuss reparenting
yeah.
and how polyvagal can fit into that as we work towards emotional regulation. And then most importantly, to be sure to find safety before going in
Yeah.
and doing heavy lifting trauma work. That is
Yeah.
so, so, so important, guys. And I cannot overstate how important that is. So, yeah, would you like to take any announcements to tell us about things you're working on, any books or projects or any
Oh,
workshops
sure.
coming up?
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I want to echo what you just said as well. Like, It is so unbelievably important. Actually, is it okay if I take a minute to expand on that?
Yeah, please do, actually.
So unbelievably important to build up a safety state. And it's not impossible. I know it might feel like it, but it's not impossible. But so important. Um, when I work with my clients, it's interesting the ones who come in with the range of potential trauma histories. One option is that they can talk about their past traumas if they want. We could do that. But the other option is let's work on feeling safe and connecting to yourself, connecting to the present moment, connecting to others, the environment, your senses. Let's work on connection and build up that, and let's work on then balancing out your defensive activation and emotional regulation. So let's work on that. As we work on that, and they get unstuck, and they start to move forward with new hobbies and connections and improve their relationships, build healthier boundaries.
Yeah,
They get to a point where they're like, I'm doing pretty good in life. I don't know if I need therapy. And I ask them, like, well, one option is that we just meet once a month or we stop entirely. That's fine. And we just maintain. And as long as you can do that, it looks like you're going to have a fulfilling, healthy life. You're
yeah,
okay. The other option is, do you feel like you want to talk about that past stuff and process it and on a somatic level? And they're like, I'm good. It's just
yeah,
like, I like where I'm at. I don't want to go into that. They're not avoiding it. It's just like, I'm no longer stuck in that moment or
yeah,
moments.
yeah,
I'm no longer stuck there. I don't need to talk about and go into that. And that happens like pretty frequently, at least in my client work. We focus on safety, and then we focus on mindfully balancing safety with defensive activation. And that helps people just get unstuck. And then the past stuff is like, yeah, it's still there, but it's no longer an obstacle. It's not something I'm dragging along with me. It's just, I know it happened. I know it's there, but I'm good.
yeah.
So
That's a really good point.
safety, safety, and then balancing out defense with safety. I would really implore people focus on safety practices first and foremost. And
Yeah,
you can hang out in that area for a long time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so as far as me and what I'm working on, yeah, I just encourage people. I have a lot of courses and I have a book and whatnot, but like spend more time with me. Go to the podcast, Stuck Not Broken. It's free. Stuck Not Broken podcast. Spend more time with me and listen more in depth about this stuff. And if that excites you, then the podcast and my blog and website will point you in more directions to learn more or to join my courses and whatnot. But hang out with me more. Go to the podcast, Stuck Not Broken. That's what I would ask people to do.
it sounds good. You can find all the details in the show notes, guys. So go ahead and check out. You'll find his website link and social media links there. And thanks again for being here. Much appreciated.
This was great. I really like to appreciate you asking me to come on.
Thank you.